what we're going to do with this video is to learn how to take quantitative data, that is data with numbers, and how to show it with two different types of stat plots, with a histogram and with a dot plot. And we're going to show that by using Google Sheets. So what I have here is a report from the NYPD on Stop-and-Frisk, which is this is the data set that my classes are using in your activity on Stop-and-Frisk. This is what I'm going to do. First of all, let's start with this column. And I'm starting with this column because it's near the edge and it has a pretty large diversity of numbers in it. So one thing you'll notice is I've already moved the total arrests row over to the side. It used to be here, and I've moved it. And the reason I've done that is because I don't want to include the totals in my data. The totals are all of these numbers added up. So these numbers have already been counted. And if I include the totals, then I'm going to start counting them twice, which is going to mess up my data. So I do not want the totals. And in order to make it easy for myself, so I can just click and drag and highlight the whole column, I have simply taken the totals and I've moved them out of the way. I mean, I might want to know the totals some other time, so I'm not deleting them, but I don't want them in the way. All right, we have total arrests, total arrests, total arrests. They're all out of the way. So I'm going to go over here and we're going to look at the white Hispanic column. And I'm going to start here and I'm going to scroll all the way down and highlight. And I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it over here because I don't want to mess with the original data when I'm doing my machinations. I don't want to end up with a situation where I can't recover the data that was originally there. So I've put this column over by itself. And the next thing I want to do is to put it in order. I'm going to leave this title cell alone. I don't want to touch that. I'm going to start just below it and I'm going to highlight all of these data. Boop, boop, boop. All right, once I get to the end, and it doesn't matter if you include spaces at the end, they'll just be filtered out. I'm going to go to Data, and I want to sort the range. Now this is very important. If I sort the sheet by column T, every single column is going to get sorted. And that is going to really mess up the rest of the table. So I only want to sort the range. And I can only do that if I've already highlighted what I want to sort. So make sure you're highlighting what you want. All right, so I've sorted all that. That's interesting. How did these zeros end up? That's weird. Well, rather than figuring that out on video, I'm just going to cut them and I'm going to paste them where they should go. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to drag it down, and I'm going to paste these. Boom. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we got that. So now the data are in order. Now that doesn't really matter for a histogram. The computer is really good at making histograms for you. So if you were only making a histogram, you could skip that step where you put things in order. But we might as well do it to begin with. Okay, to make a histogram, it's really simple. I'm going to click on column T to highlight everything. Remember, I can do that because I took out everything that was going to get in the way. So the only thing in column T is the data set I want to look at. What the heck? Why are there zeros right here? Why are you still there? What are you doing? Okay. See, important to check. Okay. Good, no more zeros. So we're going to go there, and we're going to insert a chart. Boom. Now, this time, the computer defaulted to a histogram because that's the last type of chart I made. Normally, it won't do that, and you're going to have to click on the chart type and scroll down to histogram, which is down at the bottom. But in this case, it's already a histogram. So I'm basically done. However, the histogram that the computer automatically sets up for me is probably not formatted the way I want. For one thing, this is not a good title. It's not clear at all. So I'm going to retitle it. And of course, I need to label my axes. But also look down here at these classes, the ranges that we're dividing data into. There's a lot of decimals. And while decimals are perfectly reasonable numbers, they don't make any sense when we're talking about arrests. You cannot have 1.56 arrests. So really, we want our ranges to be whole numbers. Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Customize column, and I'm going to click on Histogram, and I'm going to go to Bucket Size. It's very unfortunate, but Google Sheets calls these buckets instead of classes, as mathematicians call them. But whatever, we can't change Google Sheets. We just have to adapt. So I think 2 is a reasonable bucket size here. Notice that I can tell that this is a reasonable bucket size because A, I can see I have at least 5 different bars. And B, there's clearly differences in size between the bars, right? If all the bars were approximately the same size, that would tell me that I was maybe zoomed out too much. Zoomed in too much. Or if there were only a couple bars, that would tell me that I was zoomed out too much. But this is pretty reasonable. I can get a pretty good idea of the distribution. I'm also noticing over here that the maximum that the computer chose was 12.5, which doesn't make any sense. So I'm just going to go to horizontal axis, and I'm going to set the maximum value to 14 because 14 is 2 more than 12. Well, before I am satisfied with that, I actually want to go back and look at the rest of the data. And right now I'm noticing that while the largest number we get in the white Hispanic column is 11, or 12, excuse me, the largest number that we get in the black column is larger. I believe it's 15. Let me just make sure. Yeah, 16. It goes up to 16. Do we get a 17? No, it goes up to 16. So if I want to be able to compare my histograms together when I've done all the races, I should put them all on the same scale. So that means I'm actually going to move the horizontal axis to go all the way up to 18, because even though there's no data in these categories for white Hispanic, when I do my histogram for the other racial categories, then it's going to be important that I have room for the data where they have precincts who reported more than 16 arrests. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up these labels. This is not clear, so this is not true. So this would be number of arrests of white Hispanic people. And this is arrests of white Hispanic people from Stop-and-Frisk by precinct. So these are divided by police precinct. And then notice that there's no label given for the vertical axis, so I actually have to insert that. You would think it's under vertical axis, but it's not. It is under chart and axis titles. So I go to chart title, switch that to vertical axis title, and I just type it in. And in this case, the vertical axis represents the number of precincts who reported a given number of arrests. So what it looks like is over 30 precincts reported 0 to 2 arrests of white Hispanic people. So that seems to be the most common, that most precincts just did not arrest any white Hispanic people. And a few precincts reported very high numbers like 10 or 12 or 14. All right. We're done. I can now click on this, copy it, and paste it into a doc if I want to. All right, so that's great. That's a histogram. Now, histogram is pretty simple. Dot plot is not. The issue with dot plots is that Google Sheets doesn't actually have dot plot as an option. So to make a dot plot in Google Sheets, you kind of have to trick it. And in order to do that, I'm going to make a new column. We're going to call this the count column. And what we're going to store in this column is the count of each number. So for example, I have 0 here, so that's 1 0. Now this is my second 0. This is my third 0, fourth 0, and so on and so forth. When I get down to the ones, well, this is my first 1, second 1, third 1, and so forth. Now you might be saying at this point, Mr. Esty, that looks really tedious. It's going to take forever to count. Is there a faster way? And the answer is, there absolutely is a faster way. You can use a formula. So for this formula to work, you absolutely must put the data in numerical order. This formula only works because my data are organized from least to greatest. I'm going to put in an equal sign that tells the computer that I'm going to make a formula. I'm going to use the COUNTIF command. What COUNTIF does is it takes a range. In this case, I'm going to tell it these two cells. And it asks, how many times does a given value show up? So I could say COUNTIF 0, and it would say, okay, I looked at these two squares, and 0 showed up 1 time. Okay, great. Now we're going to notice a few problems if we try to just fill this in. First of all, we notice that while our range automatically updates to include cell 3, row 3, it also updated the minimum row, the starting point. And that's not something we want. We want the starting point to stay here. So I'm going to put in a $sign in front of the 2. That tells the computer that no matter what, we're always starting in this cell. We are never, ever starting further down. We're always starting in this cell, no matter what else changes. Second of all, this putting in 0 works great when we're counting zeros, but eventually we're going to be counting 1s and 2s and 3s. So what I can do is I can delete this 0 and replace it with this cell. I just click on cell T3. I could also just type T3. And what that tells the computer to do is say, all right, look at this range. Look at the cells T2 to T3 and count up for me how many times whatever is in cell T3 is there. So it's just going to count how many times it matches cell T3. So cell T3 obviously matches itself. That's 1. And cell T2 also matches cell T3 because they're both zeros. So that will give us 2. And you'll see as we fill down, we get 3, 4, 5, And we can just fill down the entire column, and we're going to get an accurate count. All right, magic of formulas. And if you check this, you will notice that this is accurate. For example, you can go all the way down. 12, there's 112. There's 111. 8 appears 3 times, so this is correct. Now the reason that I have the count set up like this, where I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, is because I'm going to tell the computer to make a scatter plot, which uses dots, and I'm going to use the count as the y-axis. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell the computer to stack the dots on top of each other, one going up, each one going up a little higher, instead of putting all the dots in the same location. Let's see how this happens. I highlight both columns. I go Insert, Chart. This time I don't want a histogram. That's not what I'm here for. So I'm going to go to Chart Type. And you'll notice there is no option for dot plot. It's not there. So I'm going to go to Scatter Plot. And this is a dot plot, as you can see. I'm going to play with it a little bit because, for one thing, I don't want the title to be Histogram of Count. That sounds bad. Also, this is kind of hard to read because there's no space between the dots. It goes up to 30 for some reason. We're missing numbers, which could easily be filled in. Yeah, we have to clean up this chart big time. But the point is, we made a dot plot. It's there. All right, so let's start with the title. What we are showing here is the same thing we're showing here. So I'm just going to copy and paste because it's the same thing. It is showing the same thing, and we don't need it to say histogram or dot plot because it's really obvious that it is a histogram or a dot plot. Next, I am going to go to the horizontal axis, and I would like it to go from 0 to, let's say, 20. Oh, that's horizontal, sorry. 0, I wanted to go to 0, and we agreed that we wanted our axis to go up to 18. Remember, because we need to fit the data sets that have higher numbers in there. So it's going to go up to 18. I notice here that I'm cutting off a few of my dots. So a trick I can use is actually put in -1. And now you'll notice that you can see all the dots on 0. So just by putting in a negative number, a small negative number, it becomes a lot easier to see whatever is on 0, which is important because a lot of numbers are on 0. Next, the scale here. I need to change my vertical axis. So the vertical axis, first of all, I don't know why it's going up to 30. I think it's a pretty safe bet that we can top it off at 20. So we're going to go 0 to 20. Okay, that spaced out our dots a lot better. Okay, so we come to this point, and we just want to clean up this horizontal axis. You notice that the horizontal axis here isn't very helpful. We are only going by 5s, which is just unnecessary. I mean, these tick marks aren't helpful. They're not even lined up with any of the data points. So we need to fix that. Well, there's a simple way to do that, or at least there is a way to do that. So you're going to go to Customize, and what you need to do here is go to Grid Lines and Ticks. I know. So what you need to do here is, first of all, we don't want minor ticks. Minor ticks are in between the numbers. We want major ticks. That's the first thing. It's a lot easier to go with the step. With a count, you have to put in exactly the number of tick marks you want. So it's easier to go step, and I want it to go by ones. That's a pretty simple step, right? Boom. And there we go. It's done. Now we have a legitimate dot plot, and it's ready to be copied and pasted into whatever document you need to use it with. Now, once I'm done with these two, I'm just going to repeat the process for each of these racial categories. And what that will give me, assuming that I always use a consistent scale for each of my graphs, I'll be able to put the graphs side by side and get a good idea of how the distribution changes when you look at different racial or ethnic categories.